Hello? Hello? Testing? Testing? Can you hear me? Is everybody here? This is a podcast made by people with disabilities for people with disabilities. I'm your host, Angie Keegan. Each episode, we are going to be bringing you content that matters to us, the disability community of Caboolture and the surrounding areas. We'll be talking to guests here and getting out into the community where we want you to tell us about what you want to hear about. Subscribe, like, and follow us on all the social media platforms and tell your mates. Welcome. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the Gubbi Gubbi lands on which this podcast is recorded. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and acknowledge the important role Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people continue to play within the community. Welcome to episode 0 of Is Everybody Here podcast. My name is Angie Keegan and I am the host of this show. And with me today, I have the lovely Cheryl Walsh.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Cheryl Walsh, and it's lovely to be here with you, Angie.
Oh, thank you so much for coming today, Cheryl. I needed some help to do episode 0 to tell everybody what this podcast is about. I'm really excited about it. And before we begin, we should do a visual description.
We can do that.
Yeah.
I'm 61.
Yep.
Slightly on the wrinkly side.
Shh, character.
I'm wheelchair dependent, and I'm sitting in my new super duper bright red wheelchair, which I'm very keen on. Mm-hmm. I have dark hair and dark eyes, and I'm Caucasian.
Wonderful, excellent, and I'm loving your stripy green and white blouse today.
Thank you. Got the green blouse and some very stylish green shoes.
It's true. It's true. I noticed them straight away.
It's so nice to be in a wheelchair. I can wear the very fancy shoes and I never have to worry about them getting uncomfortable or wearing out.
For sure. Wonderful. And I am a tall woman, 48 at the moment, and I am of Celtic descent. I am wearing jeans and a comfy yellow hoodie, and I've got brown hair and green eyes and an excessive amount of jewellery, I've been told recently by a friend. So there you go. I like the bling. Okay, well, welcome everyone to Is Everybody Here?
And why did you call it Is Everybody Here?
Oh, excellent question. Well, for people who live in the Caboolture region, which is what this podcast is all about, for people with disabilities in the Caboolture region, and we're making this podcast for people with disabilities, but also it's made by people with disabilities, and I am myself a person with disabilities. The podcast name Is Everybody Here is actually the name of a festival that used to be run annually by the late Matt McCracken.
Ah, now I've heard a lot about Matt McCracken. Unfortunately, I never got to meet him.
Oh.
But so, what part did Matt McCracken play in your life, Angie?
Well, very good question as well. Matt was really influential around the Caboolture and Moreton Bay area, southeast Queensland basically, probably even broader. He was a disability advocate. He was a person with disabilities himself. And he helped people in our local area to find the information that they needed, and he helped to stand up for people with disabilities. And he was always a willing ear. He always had time to listen to people. He was very validating. For my own personal experience, Matt was the person who actually helped me step to my reality that my degenerative or progressive, as they call it, disability was at a stage now that I really had to reimagine what my life was going to be like now. And he helped me by really just being very kind, but saying to me, Ange, you need to just, realize that this is your reality and you're a person with disabilities, but you've still got heaps to offer.
I think that's a big thing, isn't it, for people who have progressive issues, and whether that's that they've had an accident that suddenly they've gone from being able-bodied to not being able-bodied,
Yep.
or whether they've got some sort of ongoing condition that gradually gets worse over time. I know for me it was sort of that slightly downward spiral from one walking stick to two walking sticks to a wheelie walker to a wheelie walker, and sometimes renting a mobility scooter in a shopping centre, to actually biting the bullet and getting a wheelchair of my very own. And it's very hard. Every step you feel like you're giving away something of yourself that you're just not going to get back again.
Absolutely.
And I guess that, we think of the disability community as just sort of we're all lumped in the same bucket. But, I mean, really, disabilities cover such a huge range of issues that people face. For people who've grown up with a disability, their reality is very different to my reality, because I was able-bodied until I was in my 40s, at which time everything sort of started to sort of go downhill at a rapid rate. But the issues that I look at are different to someone who's never known anything other than living in a wheelchair.
Absolutely.
They're similar symptoms, but a different root cause, I guess you could say.
Absolutely.
So, and why do you think Matt became such an advocate for people?
So Matt was himself a person with disabilities, and he was a person with disabilities due to an accident. So he was non-disabled, then became disabled. And he was just a very no-nonsense, straight-down-the-line sort of a guy. And he was very personable and very he could engage people at all levels of power. So,
and that's a really important thing too, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's really true. And he just had a very good way of calling people out on their their internalized ableism, or their ableism that they might have been projecting onto people in the disability community. He was very much the one that asked the question constantly, is everybody here? Because it is the ultimate question. If everyone isn't here, or everyone can't be here, is it accessible? Is it open to everybody? Is it something that, everybody can get to? Whether that's physically get to, it's, pitched in a way that's of interest. It's, it's accessible in all the different ways of accessibility. So his question was always, is everybody here?
And that's a fantastic reason to call the podcast, Is Everybody Here? Because, we want everybody to be able to get something interesting, feel like they're connecting with their community. Not just people with disabilities, but families and friends of people with disabilities, people in the workforce who are looking to make the outside world more accessible. I went to the Abbey Museum walking through History Weekend a few weeks ago and got collared by their accessibility officer, who said, how can we make this more accessible? And boy, did I have lots of things to suggest to her.
Absolutely. And this is something we want to do with this show. We want to talk to all sorts of people with all sorts of experiences, and that will be people with disabilities like us. It will be people who work with people with disabilities. It will be people from the local community. It will be people in power who make the decisions, the people that work for us, the members of parliament. There will be all sorts of people on this show. And the whole reason of having a podcast is that we're busy. Everybody's busy. We want the information that we want when we want it. And so we're really trying to put together a repository of information that's available for people to find when it's relevant for them.
And why you? Why do you think? Why was this something that you felt you needed to do, Angie?
Well, I I've had a little bit to do with the Caboolture peer support group, and I've had a little bit to do with disability advocacy myself.
Yep.
My professional background is I'm a special ed teacher. So, and I did that up until my disability had progressed, as I said before, to a point where I couldn't do that job anymore. I had my feet rebuilt and, I kept trying to get back to work. I was on this rehab journey to win at my disability or whatever it was that I felt like I was doing. and that was actually when Matt said to me, "Oh, Ange, come on."
Sometimes changing your life isn't giving up.
No, that's right.
It's just refocusing.
And you become so focused, don't you? Like that sort of blinkered view of, no, this is the goal. And sometimes the goal changes. But, sorry, I digress. So I had this skill set of advocating for other people that I worked with, and I've worked in schools with people with disabilities, children. I've worked with adults with disabilities. I've worked in the community, in not-for-profits, in corporate, all over the place. So always in an advocacy role and in some way, shape or form. So and it was Matt that sort of said to me, "And you've got this awesome skill set. You can actually use that now." But the thing is, I had to learn how to self-advocate, and that's a whole other basket.
Yes, sometimes it's much easier to look at other people's problems than it is to look at your own.
Absolutely. It's true. It's really true. So I had to learn that, and I came in contact with some really amazing people through that whole process, like Kevin Stone. He was the CEO of Valid in Victoria, which is an advocacy group for people with intellectual disabilities.
Right.
And he's running a course to help people with disabilities actually build their skill set.
Yeah, that sounds amazing.
Right, it really is. So, I've been doing that. I've been got in contact with Kevin. I've met some other amazing people along the way. I don't want to be all name-droppy, but, but I have. And, so
Well, it's okay to give a shout-out to people that are important.
Absolutely. So I've sort of put it out there and said, hey, I'm doing this thing. But actually what really sort of brought it all together was that QDN, Queenslanders with Disability Network, and Wendy McCracken, who is Matt McCracken's widow. And she's also the convener of the Caboolture Peer Support Group, which was Matt's group. And still some of the older members, and I mean by longest standing members, not older members. I don't want the women to come after me because they will. They still call it Matt's group. And rightly so, because he built it with Wendy. And so Wendy has continued that, and she does that now also with the support of Alison as well. And so they run that in Caboolture on the last Saturday of every month. And so that's fabulous.
Yeah, come down to Sports Central.
Yes. Between 11 and 1.
Between 11 and 1, there's always delicious snacks and a chance to catch up with what's happening in the world of disabilities.
Yes.
As, of course, we're all aware, lots of news about what's happening with NDIS and the changes. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's just nice to have somewhere to go and have a bit of a vent to when life isn't going the way you think it should.
Absolutely.
So tell me about the Matt McCracken bursary.
Okay, yeah. So Matt McCracken actually had a not-for-profit organisation, the Caboolture Disability Support Network, and after his passing, the sale of the assets of that organisation was given to QDN by Wendy, and they put some money to it, and they rolled it into this bursary that will be happening for a couple of years. I'm not quite sure how many, but I was awarded the first one. So
well done, you.
Thank you. So I had a little bit to do with the peer support group in Caboolture, and I just thought, we're not really drawing in the younger people with disabilities in Caboolture.
Do you think that's because they don't know that things like peer support groups exist, or because there's a bit of a, that's not for me?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Like, QDN is one of those hidden gems in a way. I mean, I think they're getting more and more out there to the folk on the ground. Like they have seats at the table. They're definitely at the table with power, and they influence change in a systemic way, in systemic advocacy. They're awesome. And they're awesome at a local level as well, but not as well known, I think. So a lot of people in the disability community, if you say QDN, they may not know what you're talking about, which is a shame. And I highly recommend that you join that.
Or at least come along.
Yeah.
See what it's about. Because
Absolutely.
it's not just for people with disabilities, it's also for family members and
professionals
in the disability sector.
Yep.
And it's a chance to, network and talk to people and find out things and also socialise a bit. So
Absolutely.
But I think you're right, it can be difficult to know where to look.
Yeah.
I think going to disability expos is a great way of seeing what's out there, and I know QDN always have a very energetic group of people at their booth ready to chit-chat and hand out pens and introduce people to the world of advocacy, so good for
100%,
them.
Absolutely.
And you can have a look on they have a website, they have a Facebook page.
It's free to join.
It's free to join, always a good thing.
Yes, there you go, QDN. I'm just giving them big plugs. So, Cheryl.
And props to Matt McCracken and Wendy for leaving a legacy that is still helping people with disabilities even after his passing.
Absolutely. So before we move on from there, I'll just explain a little bit more about the bursary, because someone listening to this might be like, oh, what's that about? Maybe I could have a crack at something. So,
well, that's right, because it'll be coming up again, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Matt, so he was a very significant advocate in this area of Caboolture and the broader Moreton Bay area. And specifically, that's what the bursary was for. Anybody that could come up with an idea that would carry on Matt's work. So I thought, well, okay, maybe this idea of like, how do we connect with the younger people with disability in the area? Maybe people just connect with information in a different way now. I think there's always going to be a place for in-person peer support, always. But I think this is complementary to that. I think that people want to get the information when they want it. And I think that's how young people want to also access their information. And of course, while I'm thinking this is a good way to provide that information, I'm not saying it's not relevant for everyone, and it definitely is. And I'm no longer youth, sadly.
It's all just a state of mind, Angie.
It really is. Okay, well, I never actually grew up, so whoops. Anyway, so that's what it's all about. Then you put in an application, it goes to the board of QDN and to Wendy, and then they pick. They choose. And I actually went to Wendy and I asked for her permission to use the name Is Everybody Here? And she graciously did so. She was really happy that we were doing this and that we were carrying on Matt's work.
Yep. So what sort of topics do you think we'll be covering?
Oh, well, I know that we'll be talking about accessibility, of course, because, that is the thing that disables us, doesn't it?
Often it is. There's just nothing more frustrating than wanting to go somewhere only to find you can't get into the building.
Yeah.
You can get into the building, but you can't get to the toilets. You can get into the building and you can get to the toilets, but your seat is either right at the very front or right at the very back.
Absolutely.
And you can't take more than one other person with you, so you can't go with a crowd of your friends. Mm-hmm. It's the most annoying thing. Or you have to wait. You have to wait for someone to bring out a ramp, someone to move a seat, someone to open the door for you.
Yeah. And that's just physical disabilities. There's all sorts of other disabilities as well, right?
Yeah. And things are changing. Lots more places now are doing hearing aid loops.
Yep.
They're doing audio descriptions. Great things. And I mean, it's the same with physical access as well. Although I have to say, it's not just people in wheelchairs that need extra accessibility. It's mothers with prams, older people with wheelie walkers. You know, there's lots of us out there using wheels and sticks, and people with bad knees.
Absolutely.
You know, who don't really want to do flights of stairs into everything.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, and of course, there's also thinking about like sensory integration, like, you know, how bright or how dim the lighting is somewhere.
Oh, yes. I was at the National War Museum in Canberra the other week, and it's magnificent. They're in the middle of a huge renovation, so there's going to be lots more space for exhibits, and it was wonderful. But honestly, it was so dark that I had to have the torch on my phone on to be able to read what all of the little plaques said. And I'm like, why? Why is it so dark? I understand it wants to be atmospheric, but you know, for me, I found that white writing on a reasonably pale background was almost impossible to see, and not having any lights on the plaques themselves just made it all the harder. Having said that, though, I also, while I was in Canberra, I went to the Gauguin exhibition at the National Gallery, and they actually had a large print guide which had all of the plaques for the paintings in large print. It had an audio guide you could download through a QR code and listen to on your earbuds. It was fantastic, and I found having this large print guide so that I could sort of chuff my way around the exhibition, stop at a painting, find where it was in the catalogue, and actually be able to easily read it because it was in big bold print on a white background, which I find much easier to read, was fantastic. I learnt a lot more than I would ordinarily, because usually you have to sort of stay a bit further away from the actual descriptive plaques in art galleries. They don't like you getting up too close to the paintings, and then I can't read them at all. So cheers to you, National Gallery.
Oh, for sure. And I think Cheryl's just provided a really good example there of when you are talking, when you want to know about accessibility, you talk to a disabled person.
Exactly.
Or you talk to the people who are affected. So, because we know, and often we know the things that are going to help us, and we can make the good suggestions, and often they're not the most expensive suggestions. So yes, I think there'll be heaps of relevance here for people who are either looking at building infrastructure, they want a bit more information about disabilities for how to make their businesses more accessible, whatever it might be. I think there'll be something for everyone in this.
Let's hope so.
I hope so.
So hopefully everybody will be here to listen to us and listen to you, Angie, and your other guests, and find out things you didn't know before.
Absolutely. And I've been getting a bit of a Rolodex together of people that we will be talking to. So we're going to be...
that sounds exciting.
I know. So we're actually going to have on the show yourself.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
And we're going to be talking about the history of disability and disability access, which is pretty exciting. We've got another person with disabilities who is a parent of people with disabilities, young adults and teenagers. And she also works in the disability field. So she's going to be coming and talking with us.
Triple threat.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Belinda's pretty great. And we're actually going to have Wendy on the show as well.
Oh, that will be wonderful.
Yes, and Wendy is a nurse, and she's going to be talking to us about our rights when we go into hospital, with how we can have our support workers with us and assistive dogs, that kind of stuff.
Oh, so room for a wheelchair. I don't know how many of you have had tackled trying to explain to nurses and care workers and other hospital people that please don't put my wheelchair out in the hallway. Please don't put my wheelchair round the corner. You know, my wheelchair next to me needs to be next to the bed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which seems self-evident until you're in a hospital room and it's like, could we please take out the chair that's there because I need room for my wheelchair? It's like, oh, but that's part of the furniture. It's not part of my furniture.
Absolutely. So I just think it's really important to know what your rights are, to talk to the people like that can give us the, from the horse's mouth information. Talk to the people in the industry. Like, for instance, I got to talk to the head of disability access at Qantas.
Oh, that would have been an interesting conversation.
It really was.
I'm sure that there are a few people out there listening who've had their own issues with travelling with a wheelchair, getting up and down the aisle of the plane. You know.
Well, she was a very interesting woman, and I've got her details. So I'm going to give her a bit of a ring and say, hey, would you like to be on the podcast? Because I think it would be great for people with disabilities to know what your rights are when you are hopping on a plane.
Yeah, and I did see this morning on Facebook, actually, that Qantas is now offering reduced companion fares, so that if you're disabled and you're travelling within Australia, that Qantas will give your carer a reduced travel rate, so that you can actually fly to places, which I think is wonderful.
That's so good. I'm not long back from Perth, and honestly, having to pay for 2 plane tickets myself and for my disability support, my support worker, because contrary to what you might hear in the media, we don't just bill that to NDIS. We have to pay for it.
No, we don't. NDIS is not nearly as free with its funding as what some people might think it is. Trust me, the words blood from a stone often seem to come to my mind.
Absolutely. I mean, we're incredibly grateful to have it. We are. But also there is a lot of anxiety around the changes and what's happening. And things did have to change, be a little bit tightened up. I think we all agree. And I think that foundational supports and what that looks like is also really necessary, because so many people with disabilities have missed out on support. So we'll be really interested in talking to people in that space as well. This is going to be for everybody with disabilities and everybody who's connected with disability and the field of disability in whatever way, shape or form that is.
In some ways, I think it's almost a shame that NDIS has become the mouthpiece for disability funding, because, of course, NDIS doesn't fund everybody with disabilities.
No, that's right.
And, in fact, they only fund a fairly small percentage of people in the community with disabilities, and they only fund a reasonably narrow range of disabilities.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I think often people who are not in the disability community get a very skewed impression from media. So,
yes, it's not the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
No, it's really not. So, this is for everybody with disabilities and anybody connected. So it's not just for NDIS or whatever.
And can people contact you, Angie, if there's a topic that they'd like to hear discussed?
We would love that. So we have a website, and it is everybodyhere.org, O-R-G. Okay. And if you look that up, or you look up Is Everybody Here podcast on any of the social medias. So we're on Instagram, Facebook, all of them. Sorry. I've got the lovely Mario here who is helping us with all of the tech side of things. And we have a contact page as well. And your first port of call, though, please go to the website, and you will find all the information there, and you will be connected there. There's a contact page. We have a form if you would like to be on the show, or you have an interesting topic that you would like to have us cover. This is a podcast that is for you, okay? It's for anything that we want to hear about, because we're all part of the disability community. This is a podcast for people with disabilities by people with disabilities.
Well, that all sounds brilliant, and I cannot wait to hear what you've got lined up for in the future. Well done, Angie.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, and thank you so much for coming along today to talk with me about
it's my pleasure.
This. Yay!
You'll have to invite me back to talk about holidays, because I do love a good holiday.
And I'm going to ask you more about this Qantas thing, because I'm super keen.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think we should wrap it up. And, so please like and follow us on all of the social medias. Please go to the website, which is everybodyhere.org. And we really look forward to connecting with you all. And this and joining you every week or whenever you want to stop by and listen to one of our episodes.
Please do.
Excellent.
There's nothing like a good chat.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so very much, everyone.
Bye now.
Bye.
Can you hear me? Is everybody here?